Hi everybody, this is Carmen from On the Floor, and this is the lovely Dana. And today Dana and I have gotten really excited about Rihanna haircut that we discovered. Messy, curly, big hair Rihanna, not short, punky Rihanna. And Dana's natural texture and curl pattern is sort of perfect for this particular haircut. We've already taken about half an inch to an inch off of her perimeter, and we've also internally graduated the back. So we've sort of lifted up the interior and the back without building any kind of heavy weight line, but also not quite getting into layering territory yet. And now we're actually dealing with what I think is the most interesting and sort of fun aspect of this haircut, which is the face area. In this particular design, there's a quite short fringe length that makes a clear and really nice steep connection to the perimeter around the face. And you can see that in Dana's old haircut, which is the left side of her right side of the picture, it's gotten quite long and is about 2.5 to 3 inches longer than her chin. And what we're doing right now is opening that shape up and going as short as basically the tip of her nose and making a really steep connection all the way down to where the perimeter is sitting well beneath her shoulder. And in this case, you know, I think that elevating around face framing shape around the front is a really great idea. It helps soften the line. It helps sort of diffuse what can look quite heavy. But because she has quite fine hair, and also because of her natural texture that tends to jump up quite a bit, you can see that once we pass the chin length and we're really starting to steepen off towards the bottom, I've went ahead and cut it close to 0 degrees just to kind of keep it strong and keep the weight on the bottom so that it doesn't jump up too high. Coming around to the other side, this is an interesting area. I feel like it's often tricky for people to cut this short to long shape, particularly when you're right-handed, on the left side of someone's head. And the reason is because ergonomically it's very difficult to position yourself. I highly recommend keeping the chair at a height that is appropriate. You want to be able to see the length and the point that you're cutting from above your hand. So as I come out right now, right before I actually start to cut anything, I should be able to see my guide above those knuckles so that when I approach the hair and I really hit it with the blade, I know exactly where I'm cutting. And so back to that elevation point, you can see that as we come down and as we really reach the length, we're not elevating it anymore. We're being pretty conscious of tension, and all of that is so that we really keep that perimeter weighty enough and heavy enough that it's not going to jump up shorter than we want it to be. We really want that, you know, nose and lip area to be where things really open up, and the rest of it should really kind of cascade down and remain full. So now I'm just doing a little bit of basic self-checking and making sure that I like where things are sitting, and a little bit will actually make sure that, you know, with her natural texture and curl pattern, things sit really well and balanced. Obviously, you know, when the curl varies a lot and when there's a lot of personality to the hair, you know, checking for symmetry is important, you know, with your hands and all these various ways that we check for balance. But stepping back and really looking at how the texture sits on its own is very telling, and I think probably the most useful thing to do. So now I'm just basically taking my new shape and looking at it right down at 0 degrees and making sure that I like the way the perimeter is sitting. And again, looking for balance, self-checking, taking it with my hands. I'm noticing that that left side, right at the shortest point, needs a little bit of lightening, and you can see that's where the elevation just lightly off of her face really helps. It does really help to sort of diffuse and soften that line a little bit. So now we're kind of looking at her texture and her natural pattern and just twisting it a little bit, not with too much tension or too artificially, but just to see how that new shorter shape is going to sit on her face. I love this haircut. I totally love I love the shagginess. I love that it's light and short around her face, but it's got this kind of like hugging sort of length to it. It's not pushing off of her face in a sort of, super short feeling way. So anywho, to wrap up the haircut, what we're doing now is using an internal guide, and that's from our previous graduation that we did earlier. And I'm using that internal guide. I'm coming up and I'm cutting a fairly soft, not super steep concave angle. And you can't see it perfectly well right this second, but taking off about 5 inches. Her hair was extremely long. And with that internal guide and the concave finger position, we're getting a really nice lift and shortness right on top. So the idea here overall is to have, a long haircut, a long perimeter that has a lot of interior shape, a lot of lightness, a lot of shortness on the top that can really, bump those curls up and live really well with the shorter front. I'm pretty sure that in the Rihanna version, things are quite short on top. And in this case, Dana and I decided that we would sort of baby step our way there. She's had really long hair and really long layers for a very long time. So this is kind of a good version to kind of get her feet wet. And you can see that with the concave finger position, which is, relatively steep, short to long, and also the elevation. The other thing that I find really helpful in this case is, and here I am, by the way, just sort of self-checking myself on top with a nice generous cross-section. But what I was saying before was that those concave layers, doing a slight overdirection back to the original starting place, which was right on top of her crown, gives this really great and sort of soft push towards her face. So again, getting back to that idea that this is, although short around her face and in the front, it has a very face-hugging kind of feel as opposed to a push off of her face. Often I think when we do face framing layers and anything that's a round shape in the face area, it structurally is meant to push weight and push the length away from someone's face, which is why it's a really great way to lighten that area and open someone up, as we often say. But in this case, we actually are going for a little bit of drama, and we're doing something that hugs forward even though we've cut the front out and open. And the way that we're doing that, one was by keeping that shape around her face relatively full and heavy, keeping that line really, really heavy from the chin down. And then also with these layers, as I was saying a minute ago, doing some slight overdirection back to the crown so that we're really building some weight, even though these layers are, relatively short. We're actually building a little bit of direction and a little bit of length and weight towards her face. And that's I just think it's a great combination. Generous, short layers around the face, but with an interior that really pushes forward is a really great combo. So here I am with the cross section. Again, we've been doing all of this layering, of course, with vertical sections, and now I'm doing a nice sort of inch and a half wide horizontal section throughout the top, and making sure that I see the line that I should, which is shortest in the crown, longest forward. And I'm coming up and now just doing a little bit of self-checking and in all of the common ways that we do. And lastly here, what I'm going to do is grab a fairly wide section right on top of her center part, which is indeed where she wears it, and coming up and making sure those two sides really blend perfectly together. I like to do, a lot of soft point cutting when I'm working all of my cross sectioning and all of my checking, and just making sure that all of the lines where they meet are soft and blended well. Particularly with a natural texture like this, it isn't necessarily helpful to cut a lot of really heavy blunt lines in, a strong curl pattern that wants to move and wants to be light and wants to lift up. in some cases, of course, like we were talking about around her face, having that weightier line is really helpful so that that curl weighs down. But in other areas, definitely in these shorter layers where I want that hair to really lift and lighten up, I don't really want a lot of blunt, heavy lines. So in general, point cutting is a really nice way to just sort of diffuse things and keep things soft. I love this haircut. I think it's a great change for Dana. I think dealing with long curly hair and making it come to life is always a challenge. Keeping it light, and there we go. I think it's gorgeous. This is what we ended up with in the end after some texturizing, some diffusing, some twisting, and really just letting the curl be natural. And I think she's adorable.